So, okay. Now, let's begin at the beginning. Your name?
Dan Winter.
Dan Winter.
Glad to be here.
Good. And my name is Willem the Ridder.
Willem.
Which means William the Knight, so we have two Willems here. Huh?
Ah, the Will I Am.
Yeah. Winter. Where were you born?
Just east of Eden, actually. It's a small town in western New York.
Yeah?
It's true.
It's called East of Eden?
Yeah, east of Eden, right out of John Steinbeck.
So in New York?
Yes.
So you grew up in New York?
Yes, I grew up. I went to a little wooden schoolhouse in the country for 8 years with the nuns. And then I went to a Franciscan boarding high school and a Jesuit college. And so I had a full
Catholic upbringing.
indoctrination, absolutely. I may have recovered, I'm not sure.
Wow, the Jesuits.
Yes, the Society of Jesus. Studied Carl Jung in a monastery garden, literally.
Oh, really?
With the Jesuits, oh yeah. Yeah.
And then the Catholics in America, that's a whole different ball game altogether.
Well, they believe, there are some who believe that Jesuitism spread even there, and there was a definite intellectual flavor. My professor of psychoanalysis of literature, Dr. Tom Porter, for example, taught us the function of ritual from the point of view of the Jesuits.
Yes.
Which is radically, it did not permit scientific investigation, whereas in later years I really learned that ritual was this activity that you could see in waves to connect to a longer wave, but the Jesuits, they weren't ready for that.
No, no, no. In fact, in Italy, where I lived for quite a while, there was graffiti said Jesuiti falsi.
Yeah. It was the sense of the high and dry. But yet, on the other hand, it had been centuries of a great intellectual tradition.
Absolutely.
But it was a brotherhood that did not permit touch. And so the loss of the feminine, he taught us ritual, but then he ended up quitting the Jesuits and got married, which I approved of. Yeah.
You were the only son?
No, I have an older brother who's a powerful computer programmer and a software engineer. And I ran the family business, which was electric motors, and then he did.
Your father was into electric motors?
Oh yeah, I was Sparky the Motor Riz, designed generators, alternative energy devices, diagnosed electrical problems for many years, and built wind generators and electric vehicles. And I spoke at a lot of conferences on alternative energy device technologies, actually.
Because of your father's business?
Oh yeah, actually it's true. When I was in high school, I was already fixing electric motors.
Ah, yeah.
And the winding theory and all that. It's pretty. My grandfather started the business in the Depression, and the business was founded on what was called changeover, when sort of Tesla made a mistake and they chose 25 cycles per second and then realized you could get better energy density in the transformers at 60 cycles, but yet that required rewinding every motor in every city.
Yes.
And that's how the family business began.
Oh.
But there's a metaphor here because now we're in cycle changeover in another way.
Yeah. Yeah, those decisions, those historic decisions indeed.
Yeah, well, they later said that 60 cycle was the frequency at which the voltage required to stop the heart was lowest. So here you have, in 50 cycle in Europe, but you have this issue about, oops, have we chosen a key signature for music that biology likes? Oops. Problem. Yeah.
And your mother?
My mother is descended from Alsace-Lorraine. The family name we think there was Leclerc, which meant the birds. And then depending on whether the German or French were winning the war, the name was changed to Schler. But my mother is actually a famous artist. You can see her work at thelmawinter.com. And she paints pictures of nature scenes, water wheels, Amish country, only things which she has seen. And she sees with the eye of the bird, the Leclerc one, see. And she actually, her business as an art business is almost as big as my father's. She has like 5 people working for her full-time, just matting and framing.
So did she have time to raise you?
My mother at that time was a music teacher, and she also was an art teacher. My mother's a very talented lady. And
was she ever home?
She was very willful. My father was loving, on the other hand. My mother used to travel and teach. And, you know, my mother was home. My mother was the authoritarian, and my father was the gentle.
Ah, yeah. She was the commander.
Yeah, well, in some ways, yeah.
She was the boss.
There were 6 girls in her family and 1 boy.
Uh-oh.
And
poor boy.
yeah, the boy was the favorite of the father and resented by the girls.
Oh, absolutely.
Old story, yeah. But it's, you know, 7 children. It's the perfect branching, you know, 7 spins, 7 colors. Yeah, and her brother, my uncle, is a famous engineer and works for the National Security Agency. It's quite a story. So that side of the family was clearly the bird brain, which is there's great intellect and talent on that side. Whereas my father's side of the family was clearly the passion and the emotion.
So your father was from France, so your mother was from France?
Alsace-Lorraine.
Alsace-Lorraine,
French-German, yes.
French-German, and your father?
Ich bin ein Berliner, the winters.
Oh, yes, Berliner.
The winter of our discontent, you see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Or actually, in grade school it was 1, 2, Polizei, 3, 4, Offizier, 5, 6, alte Hex, 7, 8, gute Nacht.
Great.
Yeah.
So then you came off the Jesuit school, and then?
Well, I started out in electrical engineering and then became fascinated with psychology, and I was hired to build the electrical circuits for the polygraph in the graduate school in psychophysiology.
What's a polygraph?
Well, you know, originally it was famous for telling when people were lying.
Oh, yeah.
But we were looking at...
Lie detector.
Yeah. But we were looking at 8 what are called psychophysiological variables, GSR, finger plethysmograph, respirometer, and our clinic was famous for having differentiated fear and anger in electrical terms, which is what I did in graduate school. I worked with Dr. Albert Axe, who was world famous for documenting the electrical signature of emotion, which in a way became my life's work. And so that's what I did there.
So every emotion has a kind of electrical pulse, you can say.
Yes, exactly.
That you can measure.
Yes. At that time, it was a very complex activity. Computer programs, software, heavy-duty, messy.
Yeah.
But since that time, it has become much more elegant in what's called the Sentics literature, a book by that title, Manfred Klein's, in which the simple waveform of the shape of the emotions as a musical way to touch is elegantly described. And I discovered the geometry behind that, or I've investigated that. And that became our work on the heart harmonics and the heart link and my invention, which we'll probably get to later. But anyway, so then that's what I did in graduate school. But between college and graduate school, I was a systems analyst with IBM.
But when you were a small kid, what kind of neighborhood did you grow up?
I grew up in the woods, actually. Yeah, the little town was east of Eden. It was, you know, John Steinbeck wrote Winter of Our Discontent, which is, our last name was Winter, and then he wrote The Grapes of Wrath, and they were across the street. It was a grape-growing region. And then Steinbeck went and he studied the Grail mysteries for the rest of his life, which is what our geometry has led us to. So that was I guess, into every life a little archetype must fall.
Yes,
right. So this is my way of imagining archetype.
So you you had any contact with the other kids in the village?
Well, you see, this was the thing. I would take my little red wagon full of books home from the portable bookmobile, you see.
And read.
Oh, yes. And I read all of the American national heroes. And then we started a model rocket club. And we were famous for doing the mathematics for calculating the altitude of the model rockets and studying aerodynamic stability.
How old were you then?
Oh, you know, 8th grade, 12 years old.
12 years old, yeah.
Center of pressure versus center of gravity.
Yeah. So you were like with your nose in the books all the time, actually.
Poindexter, you know.
You didn't play outside much.
Oh, well, we take the garden tractor back to the woods and got stuck for fun.
For fun.
Yeah. And also we played priests and nuns.
Oh yeah, great. Sure.
Later I realized I think I was a priest and a nun in too many lifetimes, you know, crotchety, and that's all we ever played was priest and nun.
Priest and nun.
Oh, yeah.
And you played the Holy Mass, of course.
Oh, yes, ritually.
Yes. Ritually.
Continuously. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a sacred substance. And my childhood playmate, best friend, John, ended up going to the priesthood after high school to join the order priest who taught our high school of Franciscans. And my brother went to the seminary after the 8th grade to study to be a priest. I mean, that was the thing to do.
So this was really Catholic.
Oh, yes, very much so. Yeah.
So, what interests me about lie detectors, if somebody tells you a lie, and you believe it, and you pass it on, then can the lie detector still detect it?
Well, in a way, all the time I worked on polygraphs, I didn't agree with the theory of lie detectors. And in a way, I have to almost sheepishly admit that my invention, which is now called the HeartLink, may in fact be the ultimate lie detector. and the way that it tells when you're telling a lie, this is, in the lie detector, what it is you have someone speak something which is clearly a lie, and you look at the change in the electrical conductivity of the surface of the skin, vasodilation versus constriction it's called, GSR, galvanic skin response, or resistance. But that was a very complex way. What we now have is something much more elegant. The fact is, the heart becomes musical or coherent only at the moment at which it has found a wave that's shareable. So lie is simply a wave that's not shareable. And symmetry performs that test. It's very elegant. So we have this measure of coherence, which is simply the moment your heart becomes a laser, the amount of that coherence or orderliness or columnation, a laser becomes coherent because the waves all line up. Well, the amount of that coherence is proportionate to how truthful or how shareable that wave is. It's a very profound kind of conversation. But it amounts to, when the wave can be unpacked and distributed, it is shareable in perfect
But when you tell a whitewashed lie, so I tell you a lie, you believe it, and you tell it on as something you really believe, then it's in sync, then you cannot measure it anymore?
Well, that's the theory. The theory is simply that to tell a lie is inherently stressful.
Yes, if you know you're a lie, if you're aware.
Yes, your point is exactly well taken.
So if you're not aware it's a lie, then it's okay.
That's right.
It sounds like a truth.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's how people pretend to defeat the lie detector classically.
Right.
And a good polygrapher is a very sophisticated person.
But it means that if you, like if you tell a lie to a whole bunch of people, they all believe it, and it becomes for them the truth.
Well, ultimately, the notion here is that what survives is a wave that can propagate. And the
what survives is a wave
that can propagate.
Explain.
Let's take the simple example. You take a whole healthy apple and you hold it at your stomach, and somebody tests your muscle strength.
Yes.
And you're strong. Then somebody holds a bag of sugar at your solar plexus, and your muscle strength gets lower.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Now the fact is, muscle strength is the ability to align waves or focus them. So the body gains muscle strength because that wave of the whole apple is literally shareable.
Yeah, right.
A shareable wave is able to come to focus, and that is the same thing as strength. The way I tell the fairy tale somewhat humorously is, do not buy a used car from shifty eyes, because the ability to focus is the same thing as the ability to share, is the same thing as to have pure intent.
Yeah, so which means that we're all connected.
Exactly. Yes,
You're one.
Yes.
And the moment there's a disturbance, you feel it.
Yes.
The whole body feels it.
Absolutely.
You might have a different interpretation, but you feel it.
Right. Yes, and what we've been working on is the electrical description of why that's so.
Yeah. So in many cultures they say the heart is the center of feeling.
Yes, and for
is that true? So in your case, that's indeed true then?
Oh yes, but for very, very describable, simple electrical reasons, I believe that's true. The place, for example, where the heart is electrified, where the heart catches fire, the origin of the heartbeat electrically is my passion, actually. But the place where the heart catches fire, it's called the fibers of Purkinje. The branching, or the way the nerves nest, is called self-similar or fractal. it looks like a fern tree. And so the nature of that perfect way to catch charge is the way the heart is the perfect electrical device to turn gravity into the electricity that fires the heart. That's why it's the center of gravity, because it's the center of a particular kind of symmetry called self-similarity, or self-embedding, or self-reference, which you could think of as fractality.
Mm-hmm.
These are all fun buzzwords that we use and show pretty pictures about.
Yes. Them buzzwords.
Yeah, that's right.
But like for many people, those buzzwords are very uncommon.
That's true.
Because for most of us, and there's a big discussion still going on, the heart is basically a pump. It pumps the blood around, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. To tell you that it's a center of feeling, mm-hmm. and that feeling basically is our connection to the worldwide internet, the universe-wide internet, you can say. Mm-hmm. It's not a common, agreed upon point of view, isn't it?
There's a scientist named Ralph Marinelli in Detroit, Michigan, mm-hmm. who has published a series of papers entitled "The Heart is Not a Pump," actually.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And essentially what it is the heart muscle is layered in spiral vortex nest at the 7 tilts of the way a tetrahedron spins. And which layer of that muscle squeezes in what order throws the blood. If you take your hand and you throw a vortex with your hand, you can see how the heart throws the blood in a series of eddies or vortices or little tornadoes. Mm-hmm. And the shadow of the angle of that tornado, which is a kind of a donut in a certain way, it's as a vortex into a donut, it's a field effect. The shadow of that on the thymus is the sound of the heart feeling bliss. It's the sound, it's the music of the heart. And it's on the thymus, shaped like a catcher's mitt, that the immune system is fabricated, because that's where the white blood cells are structured. And so the sounds of the heart on the catcher's mitt, the umbrella of the thymus, are creating this cookbook for bliss and cookbook for the immune system based on the way the heart throws the blood and does not really pump. So that's just the beginning of a description of how bliss works. It's a sound alphabet, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you try to explain the whole process, but we have every human being has to deal with the heart. If you fall in love, everybody knows it's the heart. Oh, my heart, we say, So the heart is for everybody. In many languages, this is indeed the center of feeling.
And yet, so many times when we're talking about the heart, we use metaphors that have to do with gravity, which suggests a great truth.
Like
I feel heavy in my heart.
Heavy in my heart, yeah, right.
I feel lighthearted today.
Yeah, right.
My heart is floating.
Yeah.
There's an arrow through my heart.
Yeah, right.
Well, the deep germ of truth behind that is that at the moment of bliss, which is the same as charge being so attracted to a center that it becomes spin dense, which we really say now that compassion leading to bliss, turning inside out, ness we call it, creates the suction, which is the fractal attractor, that makes gravity. That's the sort of heavy, quote unquote, point here, which is that what we're calling gravity is a wind to the center when charge becomes fractal. It's like you arrange capacitors so they nest to make implosion, and you call that one-way wind to center gravity. The G-ray of vita, gravita. And so that life force, which is when charge becomes self-organizing because of perfect implosion, it's called, opposite of explosion, which is Einstein's dilemma of how you get perfect compression to allow black holes to bend time. It was implosion. We now know exactly what that symmetry is. In the heart, making gravity, the frequency harmonics make a cascade of music where the chord is based on golden mean or golden ratio. So the heart makes this fire, Phi's ray, which is how the heart makes a little bit of gravity. It's kind of powerful stuff, because ultimately it leads to the notion that the way we throw our weight around in the world, the way we're able to have leverage to bend light, let me use the Sufi poem, as it were. Since only love bends the light, only love creates. It's one of my favorite little... Well, if you think about it for a moment, if we visualize there's these nest of donuts in the heart learns to assemble them so that they implode. We call that compassion, leading to bliss. You feel a rush, great charge. You made a little bit of gravity. The fact is, that suction to center has taken the wave that was in a line, call it energy, and sucked it to now begin to go in a circle. A wave in a line we call energy. When the wave goes in a circle, we measure how much inertia, like a gyroscope, you know, inertia, is stored. And that's the only definition any physicist has ever had for mass. So suddenly, whatever sucked the light from the line into the circle is the creator. Made mass, right? Stored inertia. Quantum mechanics is when waves go in a circle. So now we say, love, low phi, long wave phi ratio, this implosion in the heart has created suction. So only love, only embedding, bends the light, sucks the light into the circle. Therefore, only love creates. It's poetry, but it's also physics.
Yeah, it's also physics. So love is in fact an incredible energy, probably the only energy around.
It's literally exactly why the EKG, when we take the frequency signature of the heart at the moment of bliss, the instruction we get is how to build an electrical device on how to use gravity to make electricity. And the specific instructions of how to do it are in the harmonics of the EKG, because what fires the heart is the ultimate nonlinear, scalar, zero-point energy device. You see, that's the heart becomes electrically self-organizing. And that's the problem, you see. That's where we get to this whole advanced conversation about the ETs and DNA falling, because when they lost that ability to make their bliss, the Nephilim, the fallen ones, fell because it is that bliss charge, which is a ponytail, which literally mechanically structures or braids or puts the slip knots in the DNA. And so suddenly we see that the genetic material responding to bliss, because it's a sound wave that braids or organizes or nests the DNA into these wave envelopes, which program it. Emotion programs the DNA because of the sound of bliss, literally. But suddenly, if you lose this ability to follow your passion or your bliss, you need an external source to implode or braid or nest your genetic material. It's this whole story about you add and multiply the waves in the DNA's nesting, and it creates a squirt gun through the speed of light in your DNA, and we call that getting a soul. It gets pretty heavy. So I don't know if you want to sort of pursue that line of thinking, but it leads to this notion that genetically our ability to steer our DNA exists specifically because bliss creates a series of sounds which affect the DNA. It's been measured. We did this study with the HeartMath Institute by Glenn Ryan, published at the Society for a Study of Energy Medicine, where the amount of braiding or ratcheting or enveloping in DNA was measured responding to the EKG becoming ordered bliss. So you see, this gets to lots of fun conversations about what's the purpose of DNA. If it's bliss, then maybe we need to change governments.
So it means that what we call feeling is a very clear signal, you can say, where you can judge if there's bliss, yes or no.
In the Gurdjieff school, I was very puzzled by this word feeling, because we were told that before you can do the sacred gymnastic, the bliss dance, you must be able to sit there and move your attention around inside your body up into your little finger until you could create feeling in your little finger. And until you could report doing that, you weren't ready to do the sacred dance.
Oh yeah, right.
And so now I understand that the more the charge is fractal, the more you get this still point, which I call the role of mind among waves. By aligning the still point, you organize the waves of charge, they begin to nest. And that's literally the tingle you felt around your little finger when you moved your attention there. And yet, at the moment of death, the body loses 8 to 14 ounces, specifically because that inertia of that spin stored by your attention leaves. You see. So that is a physical ability to move waves with the focus of this charge envelope, you see. And so...
But then you move with your focus, the feeling to the top of your finger.
Yes.
Is it also possible to move with the same focus somewhere else, outside of yourself?
That's the right question. And you see, now that we understand exactly what self-awareness is when a wave can refer to itself. And the angle at which a wave can refer to itself only is called the golden mean spiral, perfected self-embedding. So that's why we have golden mean harmonics at the moments of bliss. Well, when you have charge like that, it can unpack out of the body only in one very particular circumstance. And that is where the magnetism outside your body is self-similar to the magnetism inside. So, crude, simple example. If you map the magnetism on the Giza Plateau through the Great Pyramids, it's a golden mean spiral. It points to Orion, literally. Because that was a spin path to permissive unpacking for biology's magnetics. So the body can inhabit only magnetic fields that are, like itself, look like a rose, essentially. So that's the point. You walk into sacred space and the magnetism is unpacking in these beautiful rose petal lotuses. And you use that as a lens to unfold your awareness from your little body into a bigger body, the planet. But if you inhabit a place where the magnetic lines are all dizzy and screwed up and not embedded, then your focus is stuck inside your body. And you're stuck.
Is that why it's easier to do this in an old building built in the golden mean?
You're getting the flavor. Like, I just went into the Parthenon, you know, and there the stone was telling me, I am here to teach you how to embed. Because if you can embed in the stone, the paramagnetic stone, then you can embed yourself in stars. You see?
Yeah, because in the Parthenon, you mean that dome in Rome? Huh?
In Athens, it's a golden.
Oh, in
mean,
Athens.
Right. It's at the Acropolis. It's a golden mean ratio building.
Yeah.
It's all paramagnetic. Now,
but do you know the Pantheon in Rome?
no, same thing.
Same.
Same principle. And yet, in these places now, they've installed these wires in this metal.
Yes.
And heavy metal breaks up the magnetism of embedding.
Right.
You'll never find heavy metal in a cathedral.
No.
No. And yet they put these metal ceiling fans in churches, and it's chopping up people's aura so they can't enter stars.
Right.
Because we don't understand the principle of what life force is.
Yeah, right.
Excuse me while I get on my pedestal, but this is my soapbox.
No, it's very clear that for a long time there was a secret knowledge that those buildings were built in such an incredible proportion.
Exquisitely.
That indeed it totally transformed you while you were in that space.
And if you take that principle to its limit, you have the story of Magdalene's tantric swoon. Here you have, if you believe...
Wait a moment, to Magdalene's
tantric swoon.
You mean Maria Magdalene?
Yes. Yeah, the story is told in the Magdalene Mystery. But depending on who believes what part of the Holy Blood, Holy Grail, but essentially there was clearly some very magical bloodline implied historically. And one of the stories is that the nature of Tantra is there is an ultraviolet UV charged cocooning around the body, like in the movie Cocoon. If this is foreplay, we're in trouble, you know. Well, in that situation, you know, for good sex, you classically see stars because you are able to project the organ of your perception, the focus, because an extreme amount of charge is released when the DNA gets excited. Well, Magdalene's tantric swoon was literally inhabiting stars with the body of her lover Jesus. Well, the story of Magdalene's tantric swoon was Jesus isn't there anymore. He is re-inhabiting planetary bodies, stars. And so suddenly Bernard of Clairvaux, the Templar builder, says, this Mare, Madonna, is whispering in my ear where to put the Gothic cathedrals. 300 years later, you take an airplane up, zoom back, and you look at the pattern of the Gothic cathedrals, and they're a pentagonal fractal of the star map of Virgo, which she needed to use as a lens to take her bliss to re-inhabit the body of her lover, you see.
But the interesting thing is that like the ancient standing stones, to go way back before cathedrals, are also put on the earth in form of star systems.
Right, yes.
In Belgium, next door, there's if you fly in the sky, you see where the standing stones are, the menhirs, the how do you call them?
Dolmen.
The dolmens,
Yes.
you know. Yes, they give in negative whole star systems.
Yes. So what you're saying is maybe this predated the Jesus story, which is very wise. If I think there is a little funny saying in a book